The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Maryland, Ms. Edwards, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Years before coming to Congress, as many of my colleagues know, I co-founded and served as executive director of the National Network to End Domestic Violence. And 20 years ago, we worked with a bipartisan Congress to pass the domestic violence offender gun ban. It became law in 1996. It was known as the Lautenberg Amendment after the late Senator Frank Lautenberg of New Jersey. And since that time, we've made a lot of progress in preventing domestic violence. But sadly, there are several Mack truck-sized loopholes that prevent the law from coming to its full effect. In fact, just last week, in a fight against the gun lobby yet again over these last 20 years, the Supreme Court upheld the domestic violence offender gun ban in a 6-2 decision. As many know, leaving an abusive relationship is the most dangerous time for a domestic violence victim, and adding a firearm to that situation severely heightens the risk of injury or death. In fact, in America, the majority of fatal domestic violence homicides are committed with firearms. At least 52% of American women murdered with guns are killed by intimate partners or family members. And despite impressions from mass media coverage, mass shootings in which at least 4 people are murdered with a gun are also typically acts of domestic or family violence. And Everytown USA analysis of every mass shooting between 2009 and 2015 found that 57% were committed by intimate partners or families of victims. Research shows that common sense gun laws have a marked effect on improving women's safety from gun violence. In states that require background checks for all handgun sales, 46% fewer women are murdered with a gun by an intimate partner. And state laws ensuring that convicted abusers or those subject to domestic violence restraining orders are separated from their firearms are also associated with reductions in gun violence against women. But because of loopholes in these laws and failures to enforce them, they do little to curb the uniquely lethal American problem of guns and violence against women. 4 gaps in the law are particularly harmful. First, federal law does nothing to keep guns out of the hands of abusive dating partners or convicted stalkers. The federal law prohibits domestic abusers from buying or owning guns, but don't apply to dangerous people convicted of misdemeanor stalking offenses or dating partners, even though more women in the U.S. are killed by their dating partners than their spouses. Second, in 35 states, state law does not prohibit all people convicted of misdemeanor domestic violence crimes and all people subject to restraining orders from buying or using guns. And third, and importantly, federal law allows domestic abusers and stalkers to easily evade gun prohibitions by purchasing guns from unlicensed private sellers. That's the Mack truck loophole. Federal law only requires background checks for gun sales at licensed dealers. 16 states require checks on all handgun sales, but in the remaining states, prohibited abusers seeking to avoid a background check have very little trouble purchasing a gun from an unlicensed dealer they meet online, at a gun show, or in a parking lot. Prohibited domestic abusers know about this loophole, and they've taken advantage of it to deadly effect. And in fact, in a first-of-its-kind investigation of illegal gun sales, Mayors Against Illegal Guns found that 1 in 4 prohibited purchasers seeking domestic violence, seeking guns online had a domestic violence arrest. And finally, 41 states do not require prohibited abusers to relinquish the guns they already own. So I've joined in legislation to prohibit these guns from falling into the hands of domestic abusers. And we know that there are proven ways to help people who are not eligible to purchase guns, such as felons and domestic abusers, is to expand and strengthen universal background checks on all firearms sales, no matter where that sale takes place. And very tragically, our lax gun laws make it easier for abusers to acquire a firearm than it is, in fact, to purchase a box of Sudafed. So you ask, Mr. Speaker, why do we protest? Why did we take the dramatic action of taking to the floor of this House? It's because we've had enough. And we know that working together, we can and must change the fact that women across this country lose their lives to gun violence by their domestic abusers. 9 American women are shot and killed by their husbands and intimate partners every single week. We can do something about it. Let's close the gun show loophole.
The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Connecticut, Ms. Hesty, for 5 minutes.